I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Hey, hey, how many do we have on Zoom?
There are 6.
We have 6 on Zoom. Got it. Hey, welcome everybody to the May meeting of the Sandusky River Valley Beekeepers. Looks like right now we got six people out there on Zoom. So, you know, it looks like there's still quite a few people plugging in with Zoom. Welcome everybody. Before we actually get into too deeply into the meeting, I'm gonna ask Rosemary to go over the meeting minutes so we can approve them, the meeting minutes from our April meeting.
Real quick though, has everybody signed in? All right, I'll come take it. Huh?
Go ahead.
Okay, the minutes were April 1st. We had our last meeting here. The meeting was opened at 7 p.m. with Gary.
I'll take it.
43 members were present with 9 additional members on Zoom. There was 1 guest. Do we have any guests here tonight? If I have to write it down. What?
We can't.
The Zoom people, I'm not hearing. Okay, the March meeting, the minutes were read, Ricky motion that the minutes be accepted. Don King's, second motion was carried. The treasurer report stated that there was $5,637.41 in the checking account and 25 in the savings account. The report was placed in the file for audit. Ken presented for a discussion the desire to transfer funds into the savings account. Kathleen Kahn moved to transfer $3,000 to savings from the checking account. Mike Rearly seconded the motion. The motion was carried. The announcement were dues are due, and there were 58 unpaid members on the roster. Remaining reminder emails were sent out this week, and the membership roster will be updated only after paid members after the email is completed. March 9th, the beekeeping class went well. The club will host a fall class with remaining material. There are 12 training books left. The guest speaker was Jamie Walters, the OSBA president. He spoke to the group about marketing your honey. Highlights from the presentation included the following points: knowing the value of your honey, the government is an excellent resource. So it's NIH.gov was an excellent resource for the health benefits for honey. Choose your honey container to set yourself apart, and knowing the FDA laws, including the cottage laws and the honey labeling laws. The main meeting will be on swarms. Members are encouraged to bring their samples of their own swarm boxes. 7 door prizes were distributed, and Gary during the meeting at 8:17. Yes, he ran.
Do we have any corrections or anything to the meeting minutes?
Yes, we do. I believe the motion should read as far as 4,000 being transferred, instead of 3,000.
Yeah, the discussion was that we were going to transfer at least 3,000. We ended up transferring 4,000.
Correct.
So that we'll make that correction. We have any other corrections to the meeting minutes? Can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes? All in favor? All right, meeting minutes are approved. I'll ask Kim to do the treasurer report.
Okay, so we did have some major changes going on. The previous checking balance started out at $5,612.41. We had $220 come in on dues. And then our expenses included $50 for our guest speaker, traveling speaker. The officers had an officers meeting, and so we purchased pizza for that group. Tonight's snack and prizes, tonight's $30 rental fee for the church. And then I did move the $4,000 into the savings. So the checking account now has $1,615.95. The savings started out at 25, but it now has $4,025, no interest made this month. So the club has a total of $5,640.95.
All right.
What interest is the account thing?
Let's see, I had that paper. It's going to be, 0.15%.
A lot of the credit unions and stuff are paying around 4%. So if you wanna, if you just took that $4,000 and set it to the side, you ought to see about maybe a different location and maybe we get 4% on it.
Okay, that's a possibility. This is a credit union, the Fremont Credit Union,
Okay.
so.
Superior credit union is paying about 4% right now on their, they got a savings and a money market.
The only thing would be is if maybe we put something into a CD.
Well, we can look into that.
Yeah.
Right now, where we're at, that's all they offer.
A lot of things on checking accounts, like our savings, just a savings account, about that interest rate,
Yeah.
just on savings.
Why was it split? I thought it was split so that we could gain more interest than just a check.
Well, we're gaining we're gaining that 0.15 because the $25 that's been sitting there, you have to have $100 to start gaining the interest, so we weren't making anything on the 25.
Yeah, but-
So,
Yeah, but let me come back to the reason we made this change. It really wasn't about making money. It was because there's a high likelihood of fraud
with
when
you,
you have a lot of money in a checking account and the only thing we have available to us is a debit card. And so we opted not to keep a lot of money in our checking account and move it over to savings. So if we ever get, hacked or whatever, we wouldn't lose our whole accounts. That's a real pain to get that all straightened out. That's really the reason why we made the change. So. All right, do we need to approve that or anything? Okay. Hey, so let me just give you a quick update. We got the 2024 membership roster updated. At the last meeting, I told you there's still quite a few people who were, still out and hadn't paid, but I think today we're up to about 158 members. Right around there. We had a few, we lost a few, but we picked up a few. So.
as of April 17th, we had 143, so we had some added in there. So we're kind of pushing 145, 50 maybe.
Also, April 13th, we had a workshop out at the barn. We dumped 2 packages of beads for the new B classes. And that was pretty well attended. We had 31 of our students who showed up for that. It was pretty good. Also, John Schick's not here, but I want to thank John Schick and Rosemary Clifford and Dale Pocock for representing the club at the Earth Day over in Erie County. And I wasn't able to attend that, but from what I heard, they had a pretty big crowd. And it was pretty well attended. And, we even got like a half a page of names for our next B class. Because that's really what we do when we talk to people. When we encounter someone that's interested in keeping bees, we collect their name. And yeah, we had like 10 people that signed up and said, hey, I might be interested in the next bee class. So I think that's good. I'm still looking to see what kind of interest we have in having a fall bee class. I've had 2 people that said that they'd like to. We either have 10 or 12 books that's available that we could use that was left over from the spring classes. So if I get more interest, we may go ahead and have a late in the year class, probably somewhere between Halloween and Thanksgiving. So I'll let you know about that. Also, May 18th, we're having a hive inspection workshop out at the barn. Usually new beekeepers show up for that, but anybody's welcome to attend. We usually bring some hives up from the bee yard and we just go through them as a group, talk about what we see and So it's a hive inspection workshop. May 18th starts at 10 a.m. And then I just wanted to give you a quick look ahead. Next month, we're gonna have Barrett Zimmerman coming in. You know, Barrett is our inspector for Sandusky County, and he may even be the inspector Erie County too. But he's gonna come in and talk to us about what to expect from the inspector when they show up. And so that should be pretty good. I've been trying to get him for 2 years. Last year was his first year, and he was trying to get his training all done, and the state wanted me to leave him alone. Anyway, he's raring to go, and he'd like to come and talk to the group. And he is a member here of our group. July, we got Jamie Walters coming back. He's gonna be talking about winter bees, preparing winter bees in August. This is a new topic that's being presented by OSBA. And that'll be part of the traveling speaker program. I'm looking forward to that. Because I've read different articles about how important it is during that dearth time of the year to take some actions to prepare those bees for the coming winter. In other words, keep your bee population up rather than let it start decreasing quickly. So I'm looking forward to that. Last year, you remember the open mic night that we did? We're gonna do that in August. I got great reviews from everybody. I just want to come and ask questions. And so we're gonna do that in August. That'll be an open mic night. Bring your questions. Don't be afraid to be asked questions though. That's the nice thing about being the president, is you don't have to know everything about beekeeping. I got a room full of beekeepers. Hey, so tonight though, we're here to talk about swarms and swarm traps. Has any of us had any swarms yet? Yeah, quite a few. All right, you know, I had my experience, I was mowing our bee yard last night over on County Road 205, and I was in the back of the lot and doing the acre in the back, and man, I turned the corner with the mower, and right there hanging in 2 bushes is 2 swarms. And usually when I drive through the bee yard, I'm looking high. You know, I'm looking, you know, it's completely surrounded with trees and vegetation, and I'm looking high. Well, here's the thing, I've never seen these. Luckily, I was sitting on a mower and I could see these things. They were at eye level. So anyway, so we rounded those bees up. No, so it was a good time. So tonight I want to talk about swarms, and I'm gonna lead into this discussion tonight. I'm gonna lead into it kind of approaching the beginning of the year. And I'm gonna talk about swarm traps too. How many of you use swarm traps? Okay, quite a few. All right. You know, in preparing for this tonight, I wanted to talk about swarm traps, so it forced me to do some reading and research on these things and talking to some club members. So I think it'll be a good discussion tonight. We got several people here that use swarm traps. So let me just start out. You know, our year starts out, we've removed the winterizing stuff, the wrap, the mouse guards, sugar boards, quilt boxes. We should be beyond that now. And the thing I would tell you though, I always get nervous this time of the year because hives have a natural tendency to swarm. I mean, in the spring, that queen's been busy, and the truth of the matter, you really don't know the condition of those hives until you can get into them. And so I know the problems I had in my bee yard this year. So over the winter, though I only lost 2 nukes out of my whole bee yard, I came out of there with 3 laying worker hives. Okay, in other words, something happened to the queens. Actually, 2 of them was laying workers. The 3rd one was a queen that had somehow developed, probably a swarm, and she was a drone layer, so she never got mated. Okay, you see where that's going? I had a hive that probably swarmed. It was so early that the queen couldn't get mated. And it ended up, by the time I got into that hive, the whole hive was messed up with drone cells everywhere. And so I ended up shaking that hive out and just replacing her, putting those bees somewhere else. So this time of the year is kind of an odd time of the year because there's a lot of variables. How warm was it? You know, this year we had a pretty warm winter. Okay, you know, when I got in our hives, I only found one hive that had any winter honey left in it. Think about that, one hive. Every one of them got into their sugar boards, most of them fully, a few just slightly, but all of the winter honey had been eaten except for one hive, and we added another 100 pounds of dry sugar using the mountain camp method. We've never added that much food to our hives. So that was the kind of year that we had. Pretty warm, the bees were pretty lively. So I always tell everybody, I like to wait till it gets about 60 degrees out to start inspecting hives. Hive manipulations, your nighttime temperature should be above 50 and your daytime temperature should be 60. Questions we got when we first get into hives doing inspections, are they strong or weak? What's this queen been doing? How many of you found comb, eggs, larvae, cat brood up in your sugar boards? Okay, I'll tell you what, when I see that, that is an indication that I got a strong hive right here. I mean, this queen is laying the sugar board full. So that top box is most likely laid full. And so that's a hive that's going to be a candidate for a split or some action. Okay. The other thing I get into early in the year, people ask me, should I feed the hive or should I leave it alone? Here's my answer for you. Just about a week and a half ago, I started feeding 2 nukes because in those nukes, there's no wet nectar anywhere. I'll tell you, if you got a hive right now and there's no wet nectar in there, you need to feed it. Because those hives need something to eat. They need that energy. There should be right now, you should have pollen and nectar in that hive for the young bees. And so that's another thing to be looking for in the spring. You know, people always ask that question, should I feed? And I like to always say, well, it depends. All right. How many of you have found swarm cells on your first inspection? Did you feel a sense of terror? You know, this happens. So I always like to think this through. I'm usually sitting on the sofa in the wintertime. I know I live a dull life, right? I sit and think, what am I going to do if I find swarm cells? And so here's my approach, and this works for me. When I find swarm cells, one of 2 things have happened. Either I can look at the hive and it looks like it's swarmed. A bunch of the bees are missing. Okay, I can tell that by looking at the tops of the frames. All right, if I got a hive that I see swarm cells and I don't see a lot of bee population, right away I assume that they have already swarmed. Now that may not be true. Okay, but what I try to do once I find those swarm cells, I try to track that queen down. If I can find her, I pull her out and put her in a nuke. Okay, if I can pull the queen out of there, I can stop the swarm. And stop me from losing my bees. I just did that this week. I found a hive that was full of swarm cells. Bees everywhere. I mean, there was layers of bees on the frames. I knew they hadn't swarmed yet. So I pulled the queen and 5 frames out of that hive and put them in a nuke. And now I got 2 boxes of bees there and got plenty of bees to make, you know, to make some good queens. So that's my strategy. Some people will tell you just let them swarm. That's a decision that you have to make. Okay. These swarm cells, everybody remember this from your initial beekeeping class? Remember I told you, take this, put it on the dashboard of your car. Keep it with you at all times. So here's the thing, when I see swarm cells that look like this queen line, where am I at? Where am I at? I mean, it's certainly not an egg any longer, and it's certainly not larvae. I'm over here in the pupa stage. So I know that I'm probably at best, a week away from those cells emerging. That's why this chart is so important. If I see swarm cells, I can get an idea of how many days I've got. If I got a hive that needs a queen, I can put a frame of eggs in there. And I know that in 16 days, I'm gonna have a queen that's gonna emerge. Why is that important? How many of you do a great job of cleaning the wax off of the top bars of your frames? That lower box. Well, let me tell you, sometimes I'm not real good at that. And so what can happen? How many of you had swarm cells that will go down into that burr comb that's on those upper bars on that lower box? And then when you go and start pulling those frames out, what happens? Break them open. Okay, I did some reading to see if that's a problem. You know, ask 10 beekeepers, you get 10 different answers. Some people say the bees will repair those. And, you know, I've not had a problem from it happening, but I don't like to break queen stuff. So clean those top bars off. Again, if you got a hive that needs a queen and you put eggs in there, you got 16 days before the queen's gonna emerge. You probably want to leave that hive alone until that queen emerges, so you don't break any cells. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
I wanted this to be kind of a think on your feet kind of a night. Here's a good question. Why do these bees swarm? I already said they have a natural tendency, but I got a hive down there. Why is it going to swarm? Anybody? Yeah, not enough room. So I got this hive down there, and I got this queen. You know, she's been laying eggs for a long time. These eggs, these bees are emerging, but she's running out of room. Things are getting pretty tight in there. I mean, it's a recipe for a swarm. That's why the inspection fits together with all of this. Kind of like a strategy. What am I going to do in the spring? The spring is the critical time because I got some decisions to make. You know, that queen has been working in there for a long time, long before you were able to get in those hives. And so when I get in there and do my hive inspections, I may have to make some decisions fairly quickly about splitting a hive. I might open it up. I use the term a root beer float. I take the inner cover off and the bees just keep coming out.
Yeah.
You ever have one of those? And I may have to make a decision here pretty quick. I may have to make a hive split to try to prevent that swarm. Yeah, Terry.
One of the things I found is that when I start raising bees in nukes, you better be real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Because that queen doesn't know when you're in a 5 frame high or anything. And that's the thing I think we need to think about as we get older. And we go to the 8 frame hive,
Yep.
the lighter one. We're gonna have to react a lot quicker to, and you know, well, it's not quite full on top yet. Yeah, well, you only got 5 frames there, it's gonna be a whole lot.
It is. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know, and Terry brings up a great point that, you know, with nukes, you will get swarms fairly quickly. I remember I had one day last year, I had 3 nukes that swarmed while I was in the bee yard. 3 different nukes swarmed that day. And so there's not a lot of room in there. Hey, here's kind of a sidebar. Just the last 2 years, I've had 2 nukes with 3 boxes. Normally I overwinter with 2 boxes. I had 2 3-box nukes, both of them died over the winter. Don't know why. I had a single box nuke that did fine. But 2 years in a row, when I've had 3-box nukes, they haven't made it. It looks like a moisture problem, but I don't know if having the 3 boxes is too much. I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there.
One of the things I do, like the little nukes, I make sure I got flat top on. I put 2 nukes together, faced opposite directions, put a strap around them. I think that keeps them warm.
Yeah, I think it would. You face them opposite directions?
Face them opposite directions.
All right. Well, that's good to know. All right, so the bees start getting crowded. Sets us up for swarms. I like to think about how can we help I talked about the hive inspections, but how can we help with these swarms, trying to delay them or prevent them? What do you guys think? Everybody with me? You know, I like to think early in the year, I like to add extra space. You know, most of my hives right now, you'll find I got 2 supers on. And I give them more space early. By the way, if you're putting supers on, clean your queen excluder. Okay, and buy one of these things that helps you clean them. You don't want to skin your knuckles all up on cleaning queen excluders.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody with me?
Yeah.
You know, they sell these things at Man Lake where you can run it across the wires and clean the wax off. I read an article a couple of months ago from a commercial beekeeper. He said, you know, these queen excluders, if you don't clean them, it affects your honeycomb. You know, the easier you make it for those bees to get through those queen excluders, the easier it's gonna be for the honeycomb. So check that. Here's another thing. How many of you rotate your brood boxes? Yeah. In fact, I've been known to rotate my brood boxes often several times a year. Anytime I have the queen and just about everything else in the upper box, I often rotate those boxes. Okay, and again, what I'm after is I'm after giving that queen more room. Other things we can do, we could split a hive. You know, that example I gave you, that this hive's like a root beer float, that's a candidate for a split. We may want to decide to make a 5-frame nuke. If a hive's really congested, I may decide to make a 5-frame nuke, and if the queen's still in the hive, if there's no swarm cells, I may just take a frame of eggs and put in there in a nuke and let them make a queen. So again, but the idea is to take some pressure off of that hive. Everybody with me? Okay, yeah.
Why wouldn't you just put it in an 8-frame or a 10-frame?
You know, you could. I use nukes just because they're versatile. I've got them laying all over the place, and often also my use of nukes goes along with the way I beekeep. Like when I make a nuke, like in the summertime, I might make a nuke every other day, and I just walk through the bee yard and I steal a frame out of that hive and a frame out of that hive and a frame out of that hive, and boom, I got a nuke over here. And I just do that because I know I'm gonna overwinter between 25 and 30 nukes. So I just find those hives that need to have some pressure taken off of them, that's what I do. Everybody with me? Nukes, if you're not using them, read up on them. I think it's a powerful way to build your bee yard. It also gives you resources. Yeah, I mean, every nuke's got a queen. If you need a queen, you've got a queen you can cage and let them make another queen. Okay, that nuke has all summer to make another queen. But I don't want my big hive sitting there making queens all summer. All right, room for the queen. I talked earlier about wet nectar and pollen. So along with this queen and making room for her, and this applies throughout the summer. If you've got these kind of frames in your upper box, your queen can't lay on that frame. There's nectar there, there's pollen there. How many of you have seen nectar-bound boxes where 8 of your 10 frames is full of wet nectar? Yeah, and so you end up in a situation where your queen is running out of room. Can you get a swarm from that? Absolutely. Again, it's just like the queen running out of room. She doesn't have anywhere else to lay. It doesn't matter whether those cells are full of eggs or cat brood or pollen or nectar. If the box is full of nectar, the box is really not usable. People often ask me, what do you do? Well, that's a great question. What I do when I go out and gather a swarm, the first thing I do when I get back to my bee yard is I go to this hive and I steal a frame of nectar out of there. And I put it in the hive with the swarm. Because even though they gorge themselves on honey before they fly away, you don't know how long they've been hanging in the tree. They're probably hungry. The swarm we collected the other night, we checked them this morning, the queen's already laying. But every swarm, we put a frame of nectar and a frame of cat brood in the swarm. We drew that to try to we put the cat brood there to try to keep the bees happy and keep them from flying away, absconding. Everybody with me on this? If you get a box, an upper box, that let's say 8 or more of the frames are full of wet nectar, I'll tell you what our strategy has been. I take that box and I throw it up on top of the supers and make it a super. Man, it's a heavy super too. And I let the bees finish capping all that off. Just make it into a honey box and I give them 10 new frames. I like to get a couple of them that's drawn out, and the rest of them I let them drawn out. But I give her some room. Put her to work. Everybody with me? All right. I'll keep moving. Brood boxes. I talked about rotating these brood boxes. Have you noticed that when we come out of winter, that most of your bees and everything important in that hive is in that upper box? And so you hear people talk about rotating these brood boxes. Now, yeah, you need to wait till it's warm enough to do it. I don't like to rotate brood boxes until nighttime temperatures is at least 50 degrees. Because there's a chance I could affect the brood nest. But I like to rotate those boxes. And that queen then, who ends up in the lower box with all that cat brood and larvae and eggs, she's going to begin to work her way up. And now I've opened her world up to a whole bunch more room, where now I've taken some of that pressure off. Okay, everybody with me? All right. Honeybees love to move upward. The heat will move upward. That heat rising, this bee population of brood nests will expand rapidly. Again, it gives the queen some room to work with. Just another way. So think about what we talked about. We can add supers, that adds some room. If I got frames that's all full of wet nectar inside, I may want to move a few of them out, use them in swarm boxes. I can rotate the brood boxes. That's another thing I can do to give her some immediate room. And all I'm doing is trying to take the pressure off of this queen. I'm trying to keep her from swarming. Once the swarm cells show up, I don't know. Here's the problem. You might be thinking about making a slit, but the queen has a head start on it. She started laying back in March when you were sitting inside and that cold wind was blowing. She was starting to lay. And she's been laying right along. And I told you, I don't expect hives till 60 degrees. And so she's in there just working herself to death. And I'm still sitting on the couch. And the problem is I have limited time available to make that split before they swarm. So I like to think about it like this. Hold on a minute. I like to think about it like this. Bees will swarm. I mean, you can delay it. You can try to keep it from happening. My experience is bees will swarm. And it's usually when you don't expect it. I didn't see that coming. I thought I took enough pressure off of that queen, but look, she built swarm cells and my bees are flying around in the bee yard. So the swarm sequence, what I've read about swarms, the hive makes this decision. Now, it depends on what author you read. Some people think the queen makes it more on her own. Other authors believe that there's more of a collective decision. But what really happens is this queen, they start thinning her down. Okay, she's going to be flying. They don't need a great big queen out there trying to fly around because she can't fly. And so they're going to prepare to swarm. They're going to be having the swarm cells there. Okay, I like to find the swarm cells when I can still see the larvae in, when they haven't capped them off yet. It's where the queen is still there. She hasn't left yet. Now, she might be a little harder to see if she's not marked, but I want to get her and put her in a nuke. But here's the thing, the swarm event is going to happen. And when your bee yard starts looking like this, and you're standing in the middle of it, and you're saying, I thought I took actions to prevent that. But, and they usually land off in a tree, hopefully it's right there close. You know, we chase bee swarms with our four-wheeler. I mean, chased them up the road, asked the lady, knocked on the lady's door, hey, you care if we get our bees out of your tree? We couldn't keep them from leaving. Okay, so we've done this. I've also had them fly to the woods, and it's like, see you later. That's $135 I'll never see again. Anyway, I laugh about this, but this is the way it is. Bees will swarm. Now, I like to think about these bees now. Once they're out of the hive, what's going to happen? They're going to go off looking for a home. And so the way this will work, we get a bee swarm. The bees are going to go to an intermediate location, and Authors has a name for this location. What is it? Bivouac. Oh, yeah, I read that. I can never remember it. But that's like the temporary landing spot. That's where you see the bees all collecting on the fence or the tree. And they have sent scout bees out looking for a place that they can call home. Okay? Before I get into that though, I want to talk about some of these pitfalls about this swarm I just had. Okay? Because I got a hive sitting here now, and this hive doesn't have a queen in it any longer. So now I got a whole other set of problems other than that swarm hanging out there on the fence. Yeah, I need to take care of that swarm, but I want you to think about this. So this hive just swarmed. I have a responsibility to make sure that there's a queen that gets into that hive. Now, I usually will wait for a while before I will get into a hive. I assume that before that queen left, that those swarm cells probably had a week or less left on before one of them emerged. I figure about a week for the queen to emerge. I like to think about at least another week for her to get mated. And I usually figure a couple of more days once she gets mated and gets back before she starts laying. So I'm looking about 2.5 weeks. And I'm going to try to leave that hive alone, but this is kind of critical. When I open that hive, I need to see some eggs. It's not so important I find the queen. I'd like to mark her. But I definitely need to see some eggs. Usually if I don't see some eggs, I'll come back in about 72 hours. And check for eggs again. Okay, remember this queen's like a big old lumbering insect that's been out on her mating flight. When I say lumbering, she really is like an easy target for a bird or for other insects. I mean, she's an easy target, and she might not make it back. A few years ago, I found a queen laying in my bee yard. She was on the ground, and looked like she had dragged a bunch of bees back with her from the drone cloud, but she had a broken leg. She was never able to get back in the hive. But so she had been damaged during this flight. And so I lost a queen. Now the problem with losing a queen, that hive doesn't have any eggs in it now, right? So now if I don't take some kind of action, either get them a frame of eggs so they can make another queen. If I don't do that or get them a queen, I'm going to end up eventually with a laying worker hive. Probably within about another 1.5 to 2 weeks. Okay, this hive has been without a queen for a while. So you see where this is going? Once you have the swarm event, You gotta kind of keep an eye on this hive to make sure that you get a queen back. Make sure you're seeing eggs being laid. Everybody with me on that? So this just kind of goes with the territory. This is always the most tedious part. This is the part that I'm always wringing my hands over. I got the bee disease. I mean, I'm always worried about my bees, thinking, I know there's not a queen out there in hive 56. And boy, I hope that queen gets back in the next couple of days. And I'm always out there checking. All right, now I want to talk about swarm traps. So we talked about the bivouac. I can never remember that. It's a crazy word that's the temporary landing spot for bees. How'd they come up with that?
Military.
Is that a military word? Okay. All right, well, hey. So I had this swarm of bees out there hanging on the fence. They sent scout bees out. And so when we're talking about swarm traps, what we're talking about is we're talking about scout bees finding your trap and deciding that they have found a permanent place to call home. Now, I just, everybody knows Uwe Eichert in the bee club. The farthest trap over, he bought a couple of these. And if I expand that out, you'll see there's already bees in it. I mean, he no more than got it hung up, and the next, I don't know, a day or two later, he got to looking and, hey, that thing's full of bees already. And so, again, it's a swarm trap you can buy. I think they're about $129 or something. There's a fancy name for it. I can't think of it right offhand. I'll think of it. Here's another one, which is really, it looks like 2 nuke boxes. That one's for $85 on Etsy. So you can buy these if you don't want to make them. Here's the thing I want you to remember though. Swarm traps. It is a trap that the bees, the scout bees are looking for because they're looking for a permanent home. So this whole topic made me do some research over the last couple of weeks. That's why I wanted people to bring some traction. How many of you have seen one of these Russian scions? Anybody ever see one of these? We got people right in this bee club that's using these. And it's a temporary landing place. You can go out, write that down, Russian scion. Go out and Google it, and you'll see there's videos out there of how to make these. You hang them right in the bee yard, yeah.
Interceptor.
Interceptor, that's what this, I'm sorry. Interceptor is what Uwe's trap is called, Interceptor. And so far, he has had very good comments on this, yeah.
There's also directions on YouTube on how to make those. What it has is the deep frames, but it's got quite a bit of area underneath the frames.
Yep.
For the bees to go in.
Yep, I'm gonna talk about that in the research part. This surprised me a little bit, what bees are looking for. Okay, so this is a Russian scion. I'd encourage you to look at these things up. I know we have people in our club that have these hanging in their bee yard. And so one of them told me I had 5 swarms, and I think he said 2 of them went on these, and the rest of them went in the trees. So it's not 100%, but I was looking at the directions on these, and it looks like you have a piece of wood and you put some woven mesh around it, and you dip it in beeswax. You use an attractant on it. You can put some propolis on it, and it's just a temporary landing place. It's just a place where your bees might decide that, you know what, that'd be a good place for us to land until we get a permanent home. All right. Look interesting? Look that up on Google. Tammy and I right now, we're putting together a couple of these. Because, you know, this isn't gonna alleviate the problem of you never going down in your bee yard and looking for bee swarms. But this might make it easier. I'm thinking this will make it easier if I mean, Tammy's already told me that if I fall out of that tree, I'm gonna end up over in the nursing home. And so I would rather those bees land at a location much closer to the ground. Does that make sense? You don't wanna come visit me in the nursing home either. Yeah, Doug?
See, one of those places up in the upper right hand corner there.
Up here?
Yeah, they have that line on there, they put a 5-gallon bucket underneath it, when it fills up, they just go down into the bucket.
Yeah, I saw that online. You know, there's different kinds of these. Some people, you know, that some people will hoist them up in a tree, some people will hang them on a shepherd's hook. Some people put them, that wooden platform, they'll make it out of the lid of a 5-gallon bucket. With the plan, they're just gonna lower it down and drop the bees into the bucket. I mean, looks pretty creative to me. We're gonna try a couple of them, see how they work. So, but I do want to remind you, this is just a temporary landing place. The Russians say, they actually call this a perch or a shelter more than anything else. They don't, when I read their material, they talk about building these, but the focus they really put on it is that of a shelter or a perch, an easy place for the bees to land. All right. Okay. Swarm traps. This, I love this. Ask 10 beekeepers, you get 10 different answers about what they use for swarm traps. Consistently, what I've read from people who use swarm traps, they like to use existing equipment. You know, if you can build it yourself and you already got the equipment, well, it's probably already got the scent on it of bees, and you're not having to go out and spend money on something new. Terry, you brought in some swarm traps. Would you mind talking a little bit about these? Terry,
I'm an old teacher. I can
Terry,
do
you
that.
might want to stay on this side of the table so you don't get feedback on that.
This side of the table, oh, over there.
Yeah, over there is the
Oh,
speaker. Just don't get too close to the speaker, you get feedback.
I have most of my swarm traps on top of deer stands. They make a beautiful little platform. I got a ladder going up there. And two of them are within a quarter of a mile. I have one about a quarter of a mile away from each of my bee yards. And then I have some other ones that I'll put up if I see things. And I played around with a lot of different ones. One of my favorites was get to do. I can put a strap around it. I can carry it up there. And it's pretty handy to move. It's light. And I can leave them right in there a lot of times. What I do is I screw that bottom on. I got a couple of screws in it to hold it on, so I don't have a bunch of pieces. I don't want things falling apart when I'm moving them. And I have my little closure piece that when I set the trap, it goes up there. When I want to go back and pull it out in some evening, I just put that in there, and it's safe to carry down. I don't have any problem with it. I'll have usually one frame of honey in the center of this, and the other ones are spun frames.
So Terry, how many frames do you put in your swarm trap?
This one has 5.
5.
No, I fill them up. I put 8 or 9 in them.
Okay.
This one is just, again, a regular, box. Again, the bottom screwed on. I like these bungee clamps because I can make a handle out of them. Again, easy to carry, it doesn't fall apart on me. I can just grab it there about a strap, whichever way if you want to get it around your arm. You know, to carry it up the ladder, pretty easy. Regular trap. And if I'm using a full 8 or 10 frame, I use an entrance reducer that is off to one side. And the reason for that is usually when I get this back to my bee yard, I'm gonna take this out. I'm gonna put a jar of sugar water on this side. So they're already used to going in and out that other side. And that's my reason for that. Don't know if that means anything or not. Again, I've got one of these with a little thing on it. Ready to put in, stays with it. This one was kind of an experiment. I wanted to, because these I can use. If I want, if I've got a bad hive someplace, I can just set that, put a piece of newspaper down, set that thing right on top of another hive. And I got my queen there. I can combine them really, that's kind of what I like this one for. If I've got something I want to combine. This one's the same thing. Generally space that out like I would, and I save these in the fall. Some of these that aren't filled out. That's what I use for my swarm hive. I'll have a couple boxes of these every fall. This one's got wet honey in it. Not cat. Again, hen. Have a little hook on the side of it. Put it on my arm and carry it up there. All right, I just 3 different ways. The other thing I use, this stuff right here. Lemongrass. You ever smell Swarm Commander? I got some Swarm Commander, I've got some of this. Just come up here and go like that. Hey, that's Swarm Commander. You can grow it in your garden. Most of the greenhouses sell it. It's a nice thing that they with grass they plant. I cut mine. When it gets too big, I save it, dry it, moisten it a little bit, and I lay it in on the back of my hive across the frame.
Inside the hive?
Inside the hive. And then I also spray some of this one.
Is
It's
that-
really kind of, it's your.
Is that Swarm Commander?
Swarm Commander, yeah.
Okay.
But it's, you can do your own. I have got, last year, I think I got. There were 2 weeks that I got 2 swarms out of 8 out of a box. So I got 4 swarms in 2 weeks. You know, it's amazing, and 2 of them were in like late August, early September. And they made it through the winter. I just took it, I put them in a nuke. Took 5 frames of honey out of never hives, set them on top, they did great.
Do you assume they're your own bees? that make
No.
the mark? Do you think?
Oh, no, I don't assume. One of my hives, they're in.
Yeah, they're probably my bees.
One of my hives is on, bee yards is on the edge of the Ottawa National Wildlife Refuge. I'm trying to catch wild bees intentionally. My deer stand that I use, and I say, walk off that refuge, buddy. Come on, just walk off that refuge. Get 2 legs out across that line. But it's been a very, very productive trap for me. And again, it's just simple stuff. It's stuff we've all got. And this one I can leave it in there and I don't have to do anything with it. This one I can leave it in there. That's the only one I really have to do anything with right away. So that's my way of doing it. Swarm Commander, lemongrass.
Hey, Mike, could you talk about yours up here?
How high do you have to put those up in the trees though?
If you've watched your swarms leave, they're about 12 to 15 feet high. And that's just about what a deer stand is, about 10 to 12 feet high. And it's worked great for me.
I'd say 15 would be the max. I think, I mean, they fly them as low as 6 foot. So I think it's somewhere between that, 6 and 15.
Mike brought in, this taller swarm trap.
Jim Super and I made 3 of these. You read the books, they say your measurement should be like around, I think it's 30 liters, give or take. And they look for a small I put wire in it because fortunately I was having birds make nests in here. So I have vents on the front and the bottom. And then I take like my wife's makeup pads, and I kept old queens that I pinched. I put them in alcohol, and then I'll take that and I'll scent this with it. And then I'll throw it in here, leave it open. And I'll put my 5 frames in here, a couple undrawn. I think the raggedier the better, frames. And then I'll put lemongrass oil on top, and I'll just put a little bit at the entranceway. I don't think more is necessary. I think just a little bit. You don't need to go crazy putting that in there. And then hang it up. I go about anywhere from 10 to 12 feet. It's about as high as I get with it.
How often do you come back and resent your hive?
I don't know, maybe about every 3 to 4 weeks. I'm not out there checking it all the time. Yeah, because they should have enough room in there, especially with the foundation frames in there. They got enough to build. The ones I caught were not totally full, but you know, it gives me some time. I'm not out there all the time checking them.
I've got mine fairly close to my VR where I can start with binoculars and look at them almost. Tell you that. I've done it.
The ones I caught were on the other end of my.
And if I don't have something in them, I might go in and do a little reset after the second week.
The ones I caught were away from my property or on the other side of my property.
So Terry, you resend about every 2 weeks?
Not every 2 weeks, on the back and the top. So not really.
All right.
And then I'll put a thing in here to close it off. That way you can take it.
Yeah, Lynn, do you want to talk about yours?
Sure.
Come on up. Thank you, Mike. We got one more down here. It's kind of low.
See it. This is a handmade setup that I inherited from Mr. Mag, he's deceased, but he was a beekeeper of a number of years in Sandusky. It's all configured or connected together with the eye hooks, the little eye hooks. It has, the top here is string. This has a pole. I have not used it like to put in a tree, but I have used it to go and to collect swarms. I've had, on the swarm call list. I've used this a couple, 2-3 times until I got a hold of the plastic, like new transport boxes. So much easier than this, but this worked really good because I had to, ship the bees down inside. I put frames in it. There's no way to, like hang the frame. Mr. Mag, they must have made their frames different years ago. Cause I'm, from the book collection that I got from him, he has books from like the 30s. The ABCs of, bee culture and stuff like that. So their frames must have been a little bit bigger. So what I figured I would do if I was going to continue to use it is put notches in here. Cause otherwise they tend to fall out. So I have to wedge the frames like this way and then brace it, but I've used it quite a few times and shake the bees down in or take a clipping of the branch and put it down in there. Once they smell the drawing comb, they're in there, especially if you can get the queen. And then I would close it all off and leave the front open here. And I went back like in the evening time and sure enough, every one of those bees was in that box. And I just closed her all up and put it in the car. So, but I thought it was kind of neat, little contraption that he came up with. So kind of one of those things that you just, gonna have to keep forever now, right?
So when we're done tonight, if you want to stop up here and look at these, thank you. If you want to stop up here and look at these, you're welcome to. Hey, so one thing I want to leave you with, swarm traps. So I told you I don't use swarm traps, but I'm learning about them. One thing I learned, I was out cruising around on YouTube. And I ran across this place called Beekeeping University. And they called it scientific beekeeping, but they made reference to this Dr. Thomas Seeley. And he's written 2 books, and it pretty well details what bees are looking for their permanent home. And I have not read these books yet. I've only been able to read just pieces of them because I have to buy the book to get the whole book. But just a couple of the things that stood out to me is his research talks about this 40 liters of space. And he also talked about these scout bees looking for an echo when they show up. They look for a restricted entrance. In other words, they want a place that's safe and they want a place with enough room. But it sounds like this Seeley guy, let me back up to this, if you didn't get this. Dr. Thomas Seeley, you'll find both of his books out there. The library that I use, the Cleveland Library, these are checked out. I don't know how long before they ever come back. But I think these would be worth reading. I stumble across this guy's name in several articles. This guy's a researcher of some sort, but he's well respected, and I think his books would be worth looking at. So with that, oh, I did want to add one other thing. They talked about using an old comb, something with a scent, an attractant. And, you know, they talked about your entrance, 1.5 to 2.5 square inches. You know, I thought, and, you know, and this is a researcher who's collected some data. But at the same time, he says, you know, I can find beekeepers that have made swarm traps that they've had success with. So, you know, he's basing his on the data he's collected, but he also acknowledges that his way is not the only way.
Yeah, he did tests with different sizes.
Yeah.
That's what he did. That's how he came up with 5 or 6 points, 30 to 40 liters. Of
Yeah.
the whole and.
Which was different than what I was thinking when I went into this. So. Hey, is there any questions? I mean, you can look at these when we're done if you want. Anything, yeah.
I'll speak up on one thing. I go about it a little differently, all right, and I've been using the 5-gallon Lowe's bucket.
Okay,
Good success with it,
good.
no frames. Capping wax on the inside, capping wax all around the outside of the, right where the entrance hole is to get their attention. Use essential oil, lemongrass.
So do you drill a hole in the bucket?
I have multiple holes in the bucket. I
Okay.
have 1 3/4 inch hole up at the top underneath the lip. Then I have drainage holes, 1/8 inch drainage holes along the bottom so it doesn't accumulate water, and also I've got some ventilation holes up on the top. And then take a small snack baggie with some Q-tips in there that are saturated with the lemongrass essential oil.
Yep.
Put that in there, that works real well, and I've had really good success with it. It's-
Okay. So here's somebody that's using a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket, and is having pretty good success with it.
One of the deviations, no frames. Okay, but I let it sit and then it built. So then when we broke it up, we identified the queen, pinched her out, or not pinched, bad term, removed her.
Dispatched.
Okay, yeah, we put her in a safe condition. Then go in there with a knife, basically, and dissect the whole, everything they built on the inside. So we've allowed this to grow as a wild hive. And then we rubber banded everything into empty frames. And that's what we started with then. So they took their work, put it into a hive, and they were all over it. Worked real well.
All right.
$5.
$5. All right. Any other questions or comments? Yeah,
Well, last night on the OSBA roundtable,
Chris, I am so sorry that I overlooked you.
and that's one good thing to look at. It's the first Sunday of the month. And Actually, we had two people come in. One was Swarms Peggy. She was in her bee suit with her phone, and there was a swarm right there. One of her swarm traps looked like a newt box, double newt box. She was having some issues, and Jamie walked us through it. We had a whole little class right there of what to
See, I
do.
should have been there for that.
So yeah, check out the roundtables. It's the first of the month. And then there's always webinar at the end of the month.
This was about swarms, not a cooking commercial.
Well, yeah, but it was a swarm.
All right.
Two of them, actually. The Lori Kurz, my district rep, she had one, she's out of woodenware now. She's had so many swarms.
Hey,
She
send her
lives
down
down
to
at
my place.
Mansfield.
I got woodware.
Yeah, she went, I texted her last night. She was on the road this morning, going to get more woodware. And she's in Mansfield right now. So it's coming this way.
All right. Doug,
Did you ask if there are any lawyers present?
is there any lawyers present?
Yeah.
Any lawyers?
Okay.
You said you were gonna talk
Hey,
about the area in the bottom of the box under the frames?
I am. Well, that was part of the research. I didn't exactly. Part of the research that this Sealy guy talks about is, I was always of the impression that you wanted a box full of frames. But at least what his research shows is there was a lot of success with boxes that has empty space in the bottom. In other words, you might have two nukes stacked, one on top of the other, connected. And at least from his research, having that empty space in the bottom would be attractive to bees because of an echo that the scout bees can sense when they go looking for a place. Yeah, Terry.
I never thought about that, but in my notes, I use the super frame, the shorter frame.
Okay, so you leave some space.
Well, I've done it both ways, but in reality, I sort of felt I was getting more with the short frames, and I thought it was because they were fun frames. And I thought that's what was doing it. But when he said that, I kind of asked, just using your fun honey frame in the deep nuke block, and it worked out great for me.
But what this researcher says is one of the things that scout bees do, there's some noise that they make and they're looking for echo. And that's kind of their way of seeing if there's some space there. Because remember, they don't know anything about frames or anything. They're looking for a space. And so anyway, I'm gonna read some of the stuff these authors have put out. Because it's interesting to me, and but I can also see that there's a lot of different ways to make a swarm trap. There's no wrong way to do it. The main thing is you have some success with it. Yeah, Mike.
I put a medium frame in there when I got the swarm, and they took that medium and drew it.
Drew it on it, right?
The bees.
All right.
You're saying that the echo is about a sound. So the density of the hive might have something to do with it?
I have not got into it that deep.
Maybe that's why his bucket works good.
It could be. Like I said, there's research on this, and they talk about this echo that the bees are looking for. So, hey, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and let's go ahead and get our door prizes drawn.
Did everybody turn their name tag in that had a name tag tonight?
I did turn mine in, but I don't want to win any.